Hello, my name is Sarah West, and I'm going to be speaking today about Asteroid Lilith, the original feminine wound. I wanted to take a peek at today's Lilith transits to kind of get an idea of where Asteroid Lilith was today. And interesting, she's at 25 degrees Gemini today, opposite Saturn in Sagittarius at 24 degrees. So quite the tension there right out of the gate, right? And also Black Moon Lilith at 14 degrees of Sag today. And the Dark Moon Lilith is sitting next to the galactic center at 28 degrees Sagittarius. So I thought that was interesting. And all of that with the moon in Aries conjunct Uranus in Aries at 25 degrees, opposite Venus and Vesta in Libra. Wow. Anyway, you can contemplate that and look up the chart today. I started at 2:15 Pacific Daylight Time to look at those as well and contemplate those positions for today. So starting off, let me pull up my chart. So bear with me here for just a second. Okay, there we go. So to start off today's talk about the asteroid Lilith, I want to kind of recap kind of all of the Lilith in the Trinity, understanding that a lot of this content is coming from Demetra George's books, her Asteroid Goddesses book, and also Finding Our Way Through the Dark book. There's other books I'll talk about as my resources as I go through these slides. So in the Trinity, we basically have Asteroid Lilith as suggested as the first stage of Lilith's mythical journey, where she's suppressed, she's humiliated, and flees in a fury rage to the desolate wilderness. Excuse me. Dark Moon Lilith depicts the pain and exile, plots and executes her revenge, and Black Moon Lilith is where she shows us how she transmutes her distorted image back into its natural, healthy expression. And this is discussed in Demetra George's books and also in the EA glossary, where you can find it. So going into a little bit more of the detail here on Lilith Asteroid, it indicates where our wound originated in the feminine. And she depicts the first stage of the feminine as consort. If you remember the story of Adam, I'm not going to go into that story again, it's in the other video, but it's where it's the story of Adam who wished to rule over her and her choice to leave, where she exiled, knowing that they were equal. Lilith became the personification of feminine evil, seduced and destroyed men. This is what came out of that. And then also in the EA glossary, there's gives us information about how it's linked with Mars and Pluto, as she is the transformation agent and around the issues of personal sexual power and repressed anger. Also, the suppressed rage, when activated, has the potential to show up in violence or sexual domination. On the positive side, Lilith teaches us the art of consensus, by which the transformative energy of Mars-Pluto can be used to fuse rather than destroy relationships. In Demetra's book, goes into depth on the asteroid goddess as key transformation agents, and as a physical and spiritual bridge linking the personal to the social and the collective. I think it's very important also that Asteroid Lilith, as the only physical object symbolizing Lilith as the place of the original wound, is the place of remembering the original feminine prior to the patriarchy. So looking for her in your chart, that's what she's going to be symbolizing for us. Continuing on through the EA glossary insights that I pulled out, the role of the asteroids is to reawaken the feminine energy so that individuals and thus the collective become more whole. And the incorporation of the conscious with the depths of the unconscious require feminine perception, focus, insight, awareness, sensitivity, intuition, imagination, and therefore the asteroids form this necessary bridge. And the shift is occurring between the thinking, rational process and becoming more in tune with the emotions. Individuals cannot give to the collective a wholeness that they do not yet possess. Therefore, the feminine needs to be fostered and nurtured in the evolution of consciousness. as we come out of the patriarchal conditioning. And it goes on in the same area of the EA glossary that we all have this essential feminine aspect, both men and women, and it's an aspect within our soul. And of course, this principle has been wounded and distorted in all of us via the takeover of the patriarchy, whether we know it consciously or not. Some of us are more consciously tuned into the Lilith and are exploring her myth and the archetype of Lilith as we are on our healing journey. Okay. Hold on one second. I just see what number I'm on. Okay. All right. Also, in the EA glossary, there's, I think this was shared by Kristen, that the original Lilith rules the root chakra as she is the undistorted natural feminine, the unconditioned wild woman, independent, totally aligned with natural law. She is your primal feminine root, and the original Lilith placement for a woman reflects how you were designed by God, Goddess herself. In a man's chart, the original Lilith placement would reflect a man's ideal image of a woman, or how he most naturally actualizes the feminine within. And when I was talking to August just the other day, so I could find some content for today's meeting, I asked him about this in his own chart, and I'll go into that a little bit more when we get to his chart, about the ideal woman image. And also it is suggested in the EA glossary that Demetra George suggests that each Lilith contains the entire symbolic meaning of the archetype. So when you're looking at one, you're also tying into the others as well. So I wanted to touch into the fact that we have an actual physical object. She has a discovery chart, and this is her discovery chart. And what I love about this chart is it's named after a girl, a young girl, Lily. And interesting, let me find it here, one sec. If you look at the location of the asteroid Lilith, she's sitting right at the top of the chart at 7 degrees 18 retrograde of Leo, which is, if you look at the whole degree, it would be 8 degrees Leo. And I looked up the Sabian symbol for this particular degree, and I'm trying to find it in my charts here. One second. Why can't I find it? Oh, here it is. Okay. So the Sabian symbol for the 8th degree of the discovery chart for asteroid Lilith is this. An activist is stirring up discontent by spreading their revolutionary ideals. And I love this because in researching asteroid Lilith, she is prominent in the charts of the suffragettes. That's coming up on my next slide. But I think that's interesting as women rise up to speak their frustration, anger, or whatever against their suppression. This is exactly what this Sabian symbol is speaking to. And it's so prominent in the chart. And I thought that was fascinating. The girl that was named after, Lily Boulanger, I think I'm saying that. She's a young French composer. She died at age 24 from an illness. I can't remember what the name of it, celiac disease. So she was a young composer. And so a lot of her pieces were had that Lilith kind of effect to them, and they're in their mood, as I read. So there's other pieces to this chart I'll let you explore, but I thought I wanted to just kind of call out just the asteroid Lilith at this point, that you can see how the other Liliths are in the chart, where the dark moon Lilith is down there at 22 degrees Capricorn, and the black moon Lilith is up at Virgo in the at 6 degrees 29 minutes of Virgo is the black moon Lilith. But it's prominent in this chart for the asteroid Lilith for the discovery chart, which was back in February 11th of 1927 in Paris. So, just double check. I want to read something before I go into the suffragettes piece. In the book by Kelly Hunter, there's probably 2 paragraphs I want to read because it gave me deeper insight into Asteroid Lilith as I read it, deeper into my understanding of Lilith in the wound and compared to like Moon or Venus. And I think this was really important. So this is from Kelly Hunter's book. Consider the Moon and Venus positions in your chart to think about your experience as a woman or with women. See how they are placed and related to each other. Venus, trine, or sextile the Moon suggests a smoother emotional ease with the feminine, with oneself, and in relationship. A Moon-Venus conjunction may need to be explored to discern the difference between Moon mothering and Venus lovering to successfully combine them. Moon square Venus often indicates a tension between mother and daughter, with a difference in values and emotional satisfaction. A woman with this placement often seeks a different expression of her female self than the way shown by her mother. A man is likely to be in touch with his emotional and creative nature and may well be happier in relationships with women who are different from his mother. The opposition of these 2 feminine factors highlights the dualities inherent in feminine expression and relationship. The Moon-Venus placements are primary considerations in our emotional development and impact our confidence in how we do Mars. Lilith hovers inside of all of this development, like a good and bad angel sitting on either shoulder. As Lilith denies specific outlets of satisfaction, she promotes emotional growth through an evolving understanding of our creative process. She pulls us into very deep spaces, at times disconcerting. She tugs our psychic string in the most touchy places and private circumstances. It is impossible to fully describe the impact of Lilith moments, as their multi-layered richness in subjective details would mean little to someone else. So knowing our intimate secrets, Lilith in all her guises drags out our most personal and subjective responses built from ego structures and seeks to unravel them, to free them into fuller realization and soul expression. So the shadowy side of our power, the power that has not yet been tamed, and to put use in the services of our greatest personal gifts. This was quoted by a rabbi in the book, Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb. She's also an author. And she describes Lilith, that's how she describes Lilith. When engaged consciously and appreciated for her fire, her creative power is expressed. And tracking our Lilith nature is the key to our spiritual understanding. And I really like that couple of paragraphs from her book. Going back, you can find a lot of fantastic case studies around the British suffragettes as well as the American suffragettes. There's a selection in Kelly's book, as well as on Dark Star Astrology. She also has quite a few, including like Gloria Steinem and others that you can kind of dive into if you want to further your study on Lilith. I think the more you look at charts and look at how Lilith is aspected, especially starting with Asteroid Lilith, and then bringing in the awareness of the other Liliths at the same time, because they're all intricately tied, it will help you expand your own awareness of your Lilith in your own chart. Lilith is present in all the filters that channel spirit into matter. As creation is inherently sexual, Lilith touches directly into our sexuality. All Lilith placements reflect our primal, passionate sexual expression, our freedom or inhibitions in relation to our sexual instincts. Parental attitudes impressed at the time of our conception, throughout pregnancy, and in our childhood relationships with mother and father all affect our sexuality at such a deep primal level. We can hardly recognize them. And Lilith work moves us into a deeper, truer, and I quote her, dare I say pure, relationship to our sexuality, undifferentiated from our spirituality. So she's really tying that our true north in our spirituality includes, embedded deeply, is our primal sexuality. And it's important for us to understand that. And we are, all of us, working on this and healing this in where we're at right now. Finally, also in her book, there's a quote by Marie-Louise von Franz. I don't know if anybody knows her, but she's one of the contemporaries of Carl Jung. She's a Jungian analyst, did a lot of work with him. In her book, Alchemy Notes, she's quoted here, the natural inordinate urge for individuation seeks impossible situations. It seeks conflict and defeat and suffering because it seeks its own transformation. Addictions provide a temporary substitute for suppressed passion, but as intense as they get, they never satisfy because the soul is not deeply engaged. Emotional passion must consume itself. When in the grip of strong emotion, there is always a great potential for heightened awareness. We learn from what affects us most. Passion seeks to connect to something that matches its intensity, seeking yet resisting direction and controlled by a force that can contain it. In a state of surrender, passion is stilled and transformed to compassion and passionate diamond-bright equanimity. This is a collective as well as a personal process. Tapping such passionate depths also releases our capacity for sexual passion. Part of being human. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to dive into my chart. So I spent some time talking to Amanda and to August, and also exploring my own oppositions and conjunctions of Asteroid Lilith to herself. But what we found when I pulled up, I think I had 2 pages worth of data, is I didn't find a pattern that was solid, specific to just Asteroid Lilith. And I discussed this especially with Amanda and also a little bit with August. So what we came up with was taking a look at a personal planet like Jupiter, going over it to get a little bit more information from what was going on with Asteroid Lilith. But what we did kind of come to was, when there were significant transits to Asteroid Lilith, it's definitely going into extremely sensitive personal information that's still in the process of being healed. And so we kind of concurred that it would not be, it wouldn't behoove us to put it on YouTube. So I wanted to kind of give you some themes, but I'm not going to say who it is at first, and then I'll give you a couple other examples so you kind of understand what we're getting at, okay? So we're sharing, but we're not sharing so much that we're exposing ourselves out there, okay? Some of the themes that came up were, we definitely saw that it was revealing deep, deep feminine wounds. And also that there was a sensitivity to that the body is a vehicle. So it's returning to the appreciation and the wholeness that our body is a part of this journey, and it's you know, carrying our spirit as we're a part of this journey. And so there would be themes around that, and how in some cases there would be incidences or experiences around being taking leave or separation, that leave from something, but in that it's finding the empowerment, it's being re-empowered by doing that. But yet the woman, the feminine, is definitely wounded in that leaving, but is focused in the strength to move forward. So we found that prominent. It's also something that is hard to pin down. I found that because I went through probably 20 some dates, maybe 30 some dates here, that again and again it was like related to something that we experienced in a relationship. It was prominent that we could see it. It's either happening to us or around us, so we have some kind of visibility. So it's either focused in our own self, or it's maybe a parent, so we're getting the experience through the parent, around separation, disempowerment to empowerment, as well. And the sexuality is an undertone in almost all of them. Okay, so on mine, you can see my chart here where I'm going to talk about when Jupiter went over my asteroid Lilith. The last time Jupiter was in Taurus was back in 2012. So, and oddly enough, it landed near to one of the last times I had a super major fallout, is how I want to put it. And I was just floored at how big it was. It sits in my first house, and I will share the detail that when Jupiter had just passed the point, it was on between April 5th and April 8th, but on April 9th, I had one of the biggest points of understanding that Lilith rage. Now that there's other points going on at the same time, so of course astrology shows us that oftentimes there are other transits going on that will accentuate the theme. And on that time period for myself, I had transiting Mars opposite my natal Mars. So transiting Mars was in Virgo, about 2 degrees or so, and it was opposite my natal Mars. And so you can understand the whole Mars, the whole burst coming out there. And the Pluto was on my midheaven. But I think Jupiter sitting, transiting that point of asteroid Lilith was like this huge upsurge of rage of some past experiences towards an individual that I just had enough, and that's when it just came bubbling up. So I can say absolutely that this from a personal experience, it was like a height point of rage coming up like a volcano, and then having to deal with that. And the time that it was happening, I didn't understand that those transits were involved that way. I knew that Pluto was on my midheaven, and I knew that Mars was opposite, but I hadn't dove into Lilith. And now seeing the Lilith as a part of that, wow, it kind of took it to a whole nother level to understand it's touching into the original wound. And that part of my healing, part of my spiritual process is coming out of that, because I'd maxed out, and the empowering play was to express myself and exit, and then continue to grow and strengthen and re-empower myself after that. So I can share that without going too far outside the lines there. Moon was traveling through Virgo also with Mars, so it's acting like a trigger at the same time. So there's one example with the Jupiter coming over to show that expansion. Now I'm going to jump over to August's chart. And I spoke with August. He couldn't be here today. He's in a workshop. And I wanted to ask, I asked him when I was on our Zoom meeting the other day about how he experienced his asteroid Lilith, which is interesting because you can see the asteroid Lilith for him is at 29 Libra. It's at the end of Libra, at what they call the critical degree. Then I was curious about his personal experience as a man with Lilith, or asteroid Lilith. And so I just totally asked him the question, kind of looking at what he's dealing with presently, and kind of what the challenges he's had with the Lilith, and what he's gained from it from a spiritual and his healing journey. I asked him, the mother of your daughter, who you've had these challenges with, who he also calls his greatest spiritual teacher, and I asked him, before the fallout, did she embody the ideal woman for you? And he was, oh yes, and he was nodding in his head, and absolutely. And what's interesting, because we had Jupiter going over 29 degrees Libra just recently, it kind of gave us the insight to kind of look what was going on when Jupiter was passing over. And he said that's when he was in Egypt. And during that time, he felt like he had a reprieve, like he got a little bit of a moment of reprieve from the tension from that relationship with his daughter's mother. And he was allowed to talk with her on the phone a lot. But as soon as he came back, as Jupiter tipped over into Scorpio, all bets were off and everything changed again. So it was kind of interesting to see the dynamic of, how he looked at that experience of Jupiter, the transit over that, and then kind of getting a little bit of a break. But then as soon as it moved into the Scorpio, then it returned. And he wasn't sure if it was because he was so far away it gave them the distance to kind of operate like that. And then when he returned, it returned all the same. So we kind of started scratching our heads around, I wonder about, astrolocation and what happened when you went to Egypt in your chart. I mean, we were kind of exploring that, but we definitely looked at the Jupiter situation going over the Libra at 29 degrees, just right before, I think it was October 9th, 10th, or 10th when it flipped over. So it would have been about 9th, 8th. And so that's what he provided as his experience. So he says it continues to swing back and forth, but he did really notice the difference when he was in Egypt and when Jupiter was sitting right there. So that's interesting as well. So I don't have anything else for August. So we're going to go on to Amanda. Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. So, so with Amanda, we went through a bunch of themes, and we also came to the same conclusion that there's a lot of similar themes. Some of them are too sensitive to go into a lot of detail, that we discovered in kind of looking at it in a general sense, but we couldn't pinpoint one thing for what as a particular transit. But when we discuss Jupiter tended to give us more information when it transited over the asteroid Lilith, to provide us some kind of additional information. So you recently in October, we're now in November, so Jupiter's kind of still in the beginning of Scorpio. So kind of share what you experienced recently.
Well, I made a conscious decision actually to sit down and quote unquote channel Lilith, because she's become kind of a big player in my life in the past couple months. I mean, it's been interesting to do this series with you because getting to look at all three Lilith points has been really, really synchronistic. And also it's amazing how much I can't talk about, but they've been pretty precise. But anyway, on that day when right around the time Jupiter was on my asteroid Lilith, I decided to channel her. And it's interesting because it's also trining my natal Mercury in Pisces, which is kind of a little channeling signature there too. And so I just got to hear what she had to say from different perspectives in my chart, and it was fascinating.
I just think it's interesting that you pointed out that you were channeling her, and I'm like, well, we're scratching our heads, third house, and that's the channeling piece. I thought, wow, okay, it's right there, right in front of us. So
right. I didn't know where asteroid Lilith was in my chart at that point.
Right.
So
There it is. with Jupiter sitting right on it. It's like, well, we have an example. So I would recommend when others look at their asteroid Lilith, it might be tricky to look at asteroid Lilith aspecting herself because she's so nebulous and she's hard to get to. But if you put a personal planet in the mix, you're going to see more information. You're going to get more content around the subject material that you're trying to get at. Jupiter definitely expands it, but we also have to think of Jupiter being he wants to expand whatever he's sitting on, so absolutely gives us a greater view, but it also could have a little bit of a positive note to it a little bit, even if it's giving us perspectives that we can look at, but at the same time, if there's other really challenging aspects or things going on in your chart from a transit perspective, that needs to be also looked at the same moment, of course. So I thought all of this, Amanda had asked me, by the way, about, how did you ever get into wanting to explore Lilith? And last spring when I was at a retreat for Stephen Forrest, one of the participant folks, late gals who was there, was chatting with me about her chart and her difficult Lilith placement. And I had only dabbled a little bit in Black Moon Lilith just to understand her point, but I hadn't really looked at the others. And I said, you know what, I'm going to commit to looking at this, and definitely signed up to do that this last few months for looking at the three Liliths, the Lilith Trinity. And it's been pretty powerful, I think, for each of us who has participated, myself from having to do the homework and do the reading and look at the different perspectives that are offered out there. And there's a lot of great resources I've shared in the other videos as well to dive into it. And now I'm really interested in even doing more because of recently with the Black Moon Lilith sitting on the galactic center, which is also sitting on my sun, and my sun is square Pluto. It's kind of driving a volume of because the Lilith themes onto the world stage, and we're seeing it with the Harvey Weinstein, we're seeing it with President Trump, we're seeing it, we saw it with Bill Cosby before that, but I think more and more we're seeing sexual assault to the feminine, not just women, but they're the dominant ones. We've even seen it with men come out, and now we're having the ability to have the conversation. There's actually, it looks like there's maybe a little bit of progress here of having it actually be voiced, because that's the first step, is to actually start the conversation about what has occurred, the wound, and then from there can go into a healing it, understanding what it means, understanding it in our charts, understanding her, what she's giving us, and how we can even move into our wholeness. You want to add anything, Amanda?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. So I don't know. I thought I did pull Harvey Weinstein's chart. We don't have a birth time on him, and I also pulled President Trump's. But I wanted to share just as a closing piece before questions, if anyone has any questions. Bear with me. I've got to find it. Here it is. Donald Trump has asteroid Lilith at 20 degrees 44 Sagittarius in his 4th house. That's Porphyry chart. Conjunct his south node. Conjunct his moon in Sag. And Black Moon Lilith for President Trump is at 5 degrees Sag. And all of that is opposite his sun at 22 in Gemini, his north node in Gemini at 20, and Uranus at 17. And where is his dark moon Lilith is at 23 Pisces. So he's got a nice little T-square there. So he's got quite the powerful chart related to Lilith themes right in our president. So I would encourage you to explore his chart related to Lilith. Think about asteroid Lilith sitting conjunct his south node in the 4th house with the moon and how that is for our current situation, and what seems, because the president there, his chart represents a lot of what's going on with the people of his country, and I couldn't believe how powerful. He had T-square related to that, really strong. And Saturn is going over his fourth house, all that Sag right now. Okay. Harvey is being in the news a lot. His asteroid Lilith is at 12 degrees Aries, with Ceres at 12 degrees Aries, and Mercury at 17 degrees Aries, and Jupiter at 20 degrees Aries in the 10th. Well, we don't have a house because we don't have a time, so this is just a by sign, okay? But from other aspects, his Aries stellium is opposite Saturn in Libra, and at Jupiter, and Jupiter's in Aries at 20 degrees, and his Neptune is at 20 degrees Libra. But what I thought was interesting was the original wound being the asteroid Lilith in 12 degrees with Ceres right next to it. So there's a wound conjunction with the nurturing part, the mother part in his psyche, or in his expression, his experience, and his the black moon Lilith at 26 Leo, very near where the eclipse was this summer in August. So, and his moon, we can't say exact because we don't have an exact time, so it could flex, but it is in Capricorn at a noon chart at 6 degrees, but it could go either way, 13 degrees or so. So he could have his moon in Sag. But if it's in Capricorn, it could be close to his Chiron, which is 11 degrees Capricorn. Anyway, I just wanted to share some of those signatures because you can explore them, and then as you look at them, you can kind of see how Lilith is being expressed unconsciously in some of these, and some of them maybe now that it's front and center, how they may have to address it. Some of his can't think of the word at the moment. I guess you would call them victims, but I would like to use another word. People who have come forward to speak about their experience with him, from sexual assault to sexual harassment, wherever it is in there. They also have strong Lilith. I've looked at Rose McGowan and Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelina Jolie, and on and on and on. Sometimes we have a birth chart in some time, and sometimes we don't. But it's enough to see the Lilith in her sign and what she's conjunct or square or opposite to see kind of the influence there with the wound. Anyway, I want to go finally into our group. Our group, I think, brings a lot of this information forward to start the healing process, to look deeply at knowing ourselves at this deepest level, the parts of us that need our attention, need our love, need our forgiveness, all those points. And also how we can actually have compassion and empathy for others who are unconsciously dealing with this, some very publicly, some not, some are very private. But I think it's important to look at it, because what we do in our astrology, especially evolutionary astrology, and pertaining to Lilith, I think is a meaningful work that we do. And as you can see, we have some, the asteroid Lilith is at 19 Cap. And she's very close to Pluto in the 3rd house. So our communicating about it has a strong potential for transformation, especially next to Pluto, 4 degrees apart. But you can also see that Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, is sitting up on the ascendant, within 4 degrees or so of the ascendant. And we have the dark moon is over, I can't see that from, I can't see what this one is. So 27 Pisces for the dark moon, Lilith. And which is interesting because that's sitting next to Chiron. So very much part of the healing work we do. And that's, I want people to just to look at that and take in what they, what they're absorbing, because Lilith is subtle when you're getting to understand her in the chart. So, any questions? No?
I didn't have a question, but I did have a comment on that asteroid Lilith. That would be very close to, if not conjunct the south node of, you know, Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter.
Yes, that is correct. From our chart, from our groups.
Yeah. So that's wow, that's really interesting.
And yet that Capricorn trines the north node, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter. Look at all that Earth.
Yeah.
It's like bringing it back home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Capricorn's a feminine sign, so which is not, you know,
yeah,
most people don't, you know, kind of, I think, forget that, but it is a feminine.
Right. Yeah, I understand it better after Jason Holly's detail on Capricorn. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Sarah, yeah, I think it's interesting that asteroid Lilith in Capricorn, it's the undistorted expression. And so, you know, Capricorn seems to be getting a lot of bad press and blame and judgment. It's all because of Capricorn, but it actually, this asteroid Lilith here is the undistorted Capricorn, which is good to realize that there is one.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be there. I mean, to me, there absolutely, because I mean that's part of duality, right? There's, and not only that, it's just because I mean, look at what we're doing. Look at what's being offered. It's, you know, there's the chance to communicate, which is third house, but also what it started to. When I was talking with Amanda in August, I was like, I love to look at art of Lilith to understand where she's at in the consciousness within the art, and how there's the very, very dark, but there's also this holistic wild woman that also is in the art, with wisdom, with the little gray hair a little bit, with the owl on the shoulder. That's also Lilith. So there's this encompassing, you know, looking at it from that perspective that, you know, I wonder, it's like taking in what we have from the myth and the symbolism that we have, and where it's growing, where she, as she heals, how does she look? You know, like, what does that look like? An empowered woman who's individualized and an equal, and but also in the men, what does that look like as well? And being able to, what does that look like in art? You know, that's what I start. It's kind of nebulous. It's very hard to like pinpoint it, but it's like I like to look at it from that kind of effect.
Absolutely. And I love how there's a very strong transformative expression in our group, and a spiritual as well. So we have the, you know, the Pluto and the 12th house Scorpio there. So, and also the dark moon in Pisces. Pretty good.
Yeah. Because the dark moon, from our experience of exploring her, I really, Delphina J, I think that was the author, her work was really good because of how it's channeled. It's a place where it's channeled into the career. And that really showed up in our experiences that we shared in the Dark Moon. And interesting that the Dark Moon for the group is in Pisces. Yeah. And next to Chiron.
Great place. Great place to be.
Yep. Yeah. Fascinating. Any other questions, comments?
This was excellent, Sarah. Excellent. Bringing the depth in and showing it in the chart right there in the EA Zoom chart really brings it home.
Well, thank you for Linda for getting the chart when my internet was down last night and I was freaking out.
I was freaking out too.
I'm like, they better get back up.
Oh no, not again.
Apparently Charter is like having problems all over the US, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, we made it. Lilith is out there now, so thank you so much, Sarah. Okay,
Well,
guys, any final questions or comments? We have 15 minutes actually, so
Thank you, Sarah.
I'd
It
like
was
to say
great.
something.
sure.
Okay.
Who's speaking?
How do I say? Oh, hello, it's Tashi.
Hi, Tashi.
Hi, hey, I wanted to tell you something. Asteroid Lilith at 19 Capricorns on my descendant, and Dark Moon Lilith at 27 Pisces is on my midheaven. And I'm just about to do a very self-empowering, wonderful Lilith thing, which is do a bunch of concerts with Amazon Kids for my City of Angels charity. So there's a good example for you. It's happening. Isn't that amazing?
That is.
I like Lilith. When I first studied it, Heidi Fleiss had Lilith rising. And we
Interesting.
were like, okay. We're like, okay. That was when I first heard about it. But I thought I'd let you guys, I'd share that with you. That there's this I feel very self-empowered with it, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Everybody has a different journey with Lilith depending on where they're at, and that's okay, exactly where they are. And sometimes it's like, as August put it, sometimes the most difficult person we're dealing with is our greatest spiritual teacher. And those challenging relationships or experiences that we've had, or many on recent on the Me Too that we've heard about, right? It's a part, everybody's in that journey wherever they're at, and that's important, and how they empower themselves to become more whole. And because I think, as I've talked with the others as well, is it's important as we empower ourselves and return and be healthy human beings. So, and that includes, it's all encompassing, and she's always in there. Our sexuality is always in there. And when it's suppressed, as it has been for how many eons, we're just getting a view of it from its, suppressed state. And our work, as people come to us in our practice of what we do for astrology, or whatever how we work with it, maybe we do body work, maybe we do something else, but I think it's really important, because once we begin that journey, we can have a more whole experience as a human being, and being healthy with our sexuality, and showing up exactly as we are, and what our preferences are, or whatever. And I think it's a huge, wide spectrum for where we're at, but at the same time, some of us will be out there kind of opening the door to have those conversations, because they'll show up in the oddest of places, of course. So, anyway.
I wanted to say part of that honesty is the huge, what you addressed earlier is Lilith's rage.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. Once you can be honest and express that,
Mm-hmm.
then you can pretty much release those floodgates and
Yeah.
let it all out. I can
Yeah.
tell you that I really resonated with what you said about that rage I had. I remember, of course, my worst rage, and I looked at it as you were talking about it. I looked at the transits, and I had the asteroid Dawn squaring my natal Lilith, as well as Mars in an opportunity sextile, an opening sextile. I was like, oh my God, is this or what?
Right.
Let it out.
Yeah. When I first looked at that transit back in 2012, because I just had only been doing astrology maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months by then. And so I thought it was all the Pluto at the midheaven and the Mars triggering opposite Mars. Didn't have a clue yet. But the theme of that moment was absolutely a deep feminine wound. And when I was like looking at it going, oh my goodness, that brings a whole nother sphere of information and compassion towards myself that, wow, I really did have this volcano and went through that and had enough, and that came out like that. But it was empowering too. So, but it does scare you a little bit because it's like, I had so much rage. I could, in that moment, I felt like, man, I could kill someone like this, right? Like you have this so massive that it's a little scary that you could have so much coming up like that. So, but I think once you start realizing that and coming more in tune with it, you work on your own spirituality and your forgiveness and all that. And then you find yourself being the one sitting with someone else who's going through the same thing. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a bunch of people in the chat. I don't know if I should open it.
Patty, did you have a question? Patty?
I'll stop share. Okay. Anybody else have a question?
I had to unmute myself. Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't have a question, but I did look up, trying to find like where it would be in my natal chart, because I only have the dark moon Lilith that I put in my natal chart. So I was looking where the asteroid was, and it looked like it was somewhere, I don't know, between 3 and 5 degrees Aries, which would be at my IC, depending on where it's at, 3 or 5, it's either in the 3rd or the 4th house. But I found it really interesting when I looked up the year that I got pregnant with my first daughter, it had returned to that. It returned to Aries and was sort of like in that time frame. And I was never supposed to have children because of my endometriosis. So she was kind of like my miracle baby when I got pregnant with her. So I was kind of fascinated when I saw that. So I'm definitely going to look up more stuff on her.
Yeah, there was a story in one of the material pieces, I think it was in Kelly's book, Kelly Hunter's book, where in her back example, she talked about a woman where her Lilith had come around and her moon was sitting next to it. And when it came around, her menstruation had started again. I think it was sitting in Scorpio, if I'm not mistaken. And she was able to get pregnant because she had really sporadic cycles before that. And then as it came around and started that cycle again, it's like it rejuvenated her.
Oh, interesting.
Very interesting case studies around that. So her womanhood, her sexuality, her ability to reproduce.
Right.
Back online. It was like, whoa.
Well, this really has me psyched now because my daughter, the one I was talking about, she has endometriosis a lot worse than I ever did. And they're telling her she'll never have children. So I'm going to now run her chart and look at all this and see what it looks like in the future. That'd be really interesting. I'm fascinated. Thank you. Check
out Kelly's book, Kelly Hunter's. It's called The Living Lilith, 4 Dimensions of the Cosmic Feminine, this one.
Okay, I will. Thank you. That's awesome. Great presentation.
You're welcome. So, any others? I think I went in. The Lilith. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Somebody jumped in there. I didn't hear.
I just had another comment as far as the Me Too campaign. It does kind of seem quite Lilith. because it's been resurrected. This campaign is not new. It was started by a lady named Tarana Burke over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, it kind of, died down. So now it's been, resurrected again. So it really kind of has a Lilith theme to me.
Yeah, like it was subtle in the beginning because it didn't get enough voice to it or something before, and now
Yes.
it has.
Yeah, she started it mainly for.
And maybe it's the opportune moment with Black Moon Lilith of the Galactic Center, but it's also Jupiter's in Scorpio, Sun is in Scorpio, Mercury's in Scorpio, so the conversation can be had at the deep level if we're willing to go there. Some people don't want to because it's scary.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and but it's to me it's almost like, gosh, Lilith should be looked at by every astrologer. I just think she's so huge. If we heal that piece, how much else, comes out from that? Like that piece, just from our perspective in the United States, what's going on here, I guess. But I think it's not just in the United States. I think it's globally. So it's pretty powerful. Maybe it's her time. So, any others?
Sarah, would you like me to show how to find the 3 Liliths? I have a little table here that I could put up on the screen just for a minute.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I didn't put this one, I forgot, but yeah, that'd be great. This is from the glossary, yeah?
Yeah.
So that you put that in from astro.com, yeah?
Yes, this is on astro.com. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And in SolarFire, you can select her, each one of them.
More complicated in SolarFire, but very easy on astro.com.
I think I finally mastered it after how many times I've done it. So.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's good.
I'll just stop share now.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, any final questions or comments? Yes, Chuck, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you, Sarah. Very nice. And thank you, Linda. Gotta go. Bye.
Don't go. Okay, Sarah, thank you so much from all of us. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, August.
Thank you, Sarah. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.